This is our Mouse King head. It's a combination of rat heads. It's basically a bicycle helmet. They all have little rhinestones on the eyes that give them a little twinkle. It's an amazing piece of art. My name is Marc Happel. I am the director of costumes here at New York City Ballet. I have now been here for about 20 years. The costume shop is responsible for getting Nutcracker up and running, costume-wise.
Every holiday season, the New York City Ballet puts on 50 performances of the Nutcracker for over 100,000 spectators, featuring more than 150 dancers and musicians and more than 120 children.
That can be 200 to 400 costumes. Not that we're building those every season, but we're building part of that every season. We have an incredible team here, drapers, cutters, stitchers. We have an incredible dyer. We have a great shopper. We have a great shop manager. We're always kind of working ahead. I may start talking about Nutcracker with our wardrobe departments in like September to get an idea of what they think they might want. And then as we get the fall season finished, part of our team will start to gradually switch over to Nutcracker.
Since 1954, the New York City Ballet has honored the legacy of this production from George Balanchine's famed choreography, Tchaikovsky's iconic score, and more than 150 lavish costumes from designer Barbara Karinska.
The legacy of Karinska is always just everywhere here in the shop and on that stage. She was so integral to Balanchine's work. He considered her half the success of his ballets was her costumes. The embellishments, of course, are very important, and many of those have disappeared over the years, and we try to bring those back and try to bring, a version back that maybe lasts longer or is more reflective. In collaborating with dancers, there's always fittings. Talking to them, is this comfortable? Did this work for you last season? How could we change it to make it work better? So the fittings are a place that we really get all that information from. How do you feel about the elastic?
It feels good.
Feel comfortable? Not too tight?
And they'll pancake it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Not too tight. This all looks great.
Yeah.
So we're fitting Mira Nadon, who's one of our principals, in the pink Sugar Plum, one of our favorite costumes from this ballet. I mean, that bodice is just so simple, but so beautiful.
When I'm wearing this costume, this is the first time that the Sugar Plum Fairy appears in the Nutcracker. So this is your introduction to her. You have the pretty ballet pink, a little tutu, all the sparkles, and you feel really regal and beautiful. So pretty.
Yeah, she wears this for both the pink and the green.
So I changed my costume, but the headpiece is the same.
So this is our green tutu.
Yeah, I love this tutu. It's so unique.
Yeah.
You very rarely see green tutus.
Yeah.
So.
And also with this detail, trim and tulle, and each one outlined with this gold metallic thread.
My first tutu is a long romantic style tutu, so it hits at my knee. And then this is a short tutu. So that also informs your dancing, whether you're wearing a tutu or a longer skirt. If you're wearing a longer skirt, I feel like sometimes you feel like a little more lyrical and you have the movement of the skirt, whereas the tutu, you just really see the whole line. In the studio, we wear practice tutus, so they're usually very simple, no decorations, but they help the partner be able to feel what the tutu is going to feel like. If they're standing behind you, they can't be right up next to you. They have to be a little farther away because of the width of the tutu.
It's all about this. It's all about the partnering. It's clear of any kind of decoration because there's a lot of this that happens. In many ways, it's like costuming athletes. The movement is so extreme at times, so it's a lot about thinking about how do we approach this in a stretch way. For instance, the tutus, they're all based on a pair of trunks that were always made out of a non-stretch garment. And now we've figured out that we can actually make them out of a very strong stretch net, so that allows the dancers more mobility.
Another update to the costume design process is a new dyeing workflow that ensures each dancer has a pair of tights customized to their own skin tone.
What you're basically doing, and I can show you, taking this rings and rings and rings of flesh colors, and our dyer comes in and takes these flesh colors and holds them over their skin to come up with what their best flesh color is. And then tights are dyed to their certain flesh color. You're looking at their flesh color here in this room, but it changes considerably on stage. It's kind of a science experiment of figuring out the combination of the color that this is dyed and their own flesh color and how they come together. Our dyer has many spreadsheets of all of our dancers and their color or the combinations of colors.
Yeah. And it is like sometimes, you come back from the summer, you're a little tanner.
Yeah.
You'll have to say, could I get a shade darker?
Pretty much we've gotten it down to a science now, but there's still always tweaking.
But working with the sketches and designs that Karinska envisioned decades ago can present unique challenges and hurdles for Marc and the costume shop.
It is a real challenge to work on costumes that were originally built in 1964. The color palettes have changed. A lot of the fabrics that were used back then, like antique satin, are no longer available because sometimes the fabrics don't exist, or the colors, which is so important, don't exist, especially like the Sugar Plum colors. We've worked with a company to have the fabrics made in a specific color so that we can replicate costumes as they were. Act 1 is much more grounded. You have a much darker color palette, a lot of darker velvets, a lot of darker wools. It then very much changes when you get into the second act, because when that curtain goes up, then it's brighter, more uplifting. It's more of a fantasy. We have our Marie. This is Marie's party dress. This is the first thing she appears in the first act. It's a beautiful color. We kind of brought it back to what the original color was. It's a really beautiful silk wool trimmed in all these pink velvet combined with marabou as a trim. And she has a kind of very intricate petticoat because, again, with all of these party scenes, we do see all of this. Very simple, but I think very effective for our Marie. This is a little girl doll that comes out of the Christmas box. She's basically a little wind-up doll. Karinska would combine various colors of tulle. Underneath there's this pink, paler blue, and then a darker blue on top of it. It just gives it depth, and occasionally you have these surprises of colors that come out. A satin bodice covered in pom-poms that give her a lot of movement during that choreography. Well, this is one of the first costumes we see in the second act. These are the angels. They appear to glide across the stage. The hoop in the hem kind of keeps this shape and allows them to move without really seeing their feet. The pink Sugar Plum is a very simple costume. It's again one of the favorites. It's pink satin bodice and then layers of tulle to create these skirts. The top layer is a creamy white color, and then there's various layers of pink underneath. All of this has been dotted with Swarovski crystals. This is a situation where when I came here, I felt like we needed to rethink this, because when the crystals were originally applied, all of these crystals, they were just done on the face of the tulle. And through movement, you constantly saw the back of them. So I kind of thought that it would be a great idea that when we're applying them, we mirror on the inside the same crystals so that in movement, we never see the back. It just made it look a little more complete. The next here we have hot chocolate. This is the principal hot chocolate. This is a fine example of where we have the little cameo with Balanchine. This is something that the audience never sees, but will always be there. This is an example where we use different kinds of fabric to kind of replicate candy. These are just lame that have been stuffed with polyester batting. These are buttons applied with these little crystal stars. We also use a really interesting, really beautiful old lace trim on her apron. There's just one layer, but then the underlayer is just covered in pleated lame. There's a lot of movement in this section, so we do see a lot of the underskirt. We have the Arabian costume, very intricate. All of this is combinations of trims that have been laid onto this gold lace, a lot of gold lame that's been inset, a long skirt, and she has a headpiece that is gold embroidered lace. This is one that we do often have to rebuild parts of, especially the bodice, because it is made of fabrics that have a way of tarnishing over time. So this will many times turn to a very kind of darker gold. We like to keep it brighter, so we will many times rebuild this. This is a really interesting garment. This is tea. As far as we know, this is an original. At least we know that these motifs that are all over it are original to Nutcracker. So we, for years, have been working to kind of keep this going, because the idea that it may be original is so interesting. A lot of these are trees, bugs, birds, dragonflies. Here we have two figures down here in the lower left. The base material is a metallic net. That's something that has lost some of its metallicness, its sheen over the years, but it's still holding up pretty well. Moving on, we have our marzipan. I think this is also one of my favorite costumes. Marzipan is a tutu of a very different kind of design. All of these little stuffed marzipan fruits and vegetables, there's little carrots and strawberries. This is all on a wire frame. And then it's a satin bodice with, again, that bone casings that are done in satin. This is also one of the costumes in Nutcracker that's very hard to replicate because the amount of work that goes into this is incredible. We try not to have to rebuild this at all. You know, we'll redo the ruffle, we'll redo the bodice, or redo this part of the tutu, but always go back and use this because this would be a very costly part of the costume to replicate. Then here we have one of our flowers, an amazing costume. It's layers and layers and layers of pleated tulle and net that are all combined to create the skirt. And then leaves and flower petals mixed in. It's a very simple costume. This is, I think, a beautiful moment when you have several of these on stage. And that particular part of Nutcracker is a really beautiful moment. There is the constant issue of sweat. It comes with athletes on stage. What has to happen many times is these costumes are hung on a rack in a hallway and we have fans directed on them so that we get them to dry, especially on days where we have a matinee and an evening. None of it can really go out to a dry cleaner until at the end of the run, because there just isn't the time to get them to the dry cleaner, get them dry cleaned, get them back. So there are a lot of tricks. I mean, everyone's heard about the spraying things with alcohol, with vodka. That, in fact, is true. We do that. And then there's other little tricks, spot cleaning, that kind of thing. Then we have Dewdrop. I love this costume, and I think it's also a costume that was so ahead of its time. Most of the costume is made of just a single layer of stretch nets. So we are seeing a lot of the dancer's own flesh under this. And then each of the bone casings is applied on the outside in a Duchess satin and then a skirt of pleated tulle. This is always an interesting thing to me. Karinska, one of the things that she often did, which I found so interesting, is she used a polyester horsehair, which is something that you would usually use on the inside of a ribbon to give it shape. But in this case, she's just used it as a trim. Next, we have our green sugar plum. She appears with the cavalier in the second act. This is a tutu, an unusual tutu. Layers of tulle have been put together and then folded and tacked in this way that gives us this very kind of unusual top layer to this tutu. And then all of these are just buttons with Swarovski crystals that have been applied to the center. Here we have a selection of headpieces. We have the bunny. It's one of my favorites. I think it's very sweet. She's very funny when she stands back there playing her drum during the battle scene. And then, of course, from the first act as well, we have the mice, which are part of that battle scene. They can see out this net part here, which is his mouth. As you might imagine, these are very hot, running around on stage, but also very effective. Then here, this is the Dewdrop's headpiece, which is a beautiful little kind of fountain of crystals. And then over here, we have the sugar plum crown. And then this is the headpiece for Arabian, combination of crystals and fringe. And then this is all made up of various pieces of embroidery that are combined. And then here we have the Nutcracker headpiece that the little boy wears. It's made up of a fabric that he can see through, but on stage it looks like, of course, a solid headpiece. And it has a contraption in here that allows it to stay on his head during that whole scene because he does have a lot of activity that happens. This is our Mouse King head. It's a combination of rat heads. They all have crowns. This is a really hard costume piece to wear. It's basically a bicycle helmet. And then he sees out this this area here of the mouth, all of these are made so they kind of move. So during movement, it all is kind of moving at the same time. It's an amazing piece of art. They all have little rhinestones on the eyes that give them a little twinkle. I definitely think this is something that stands out for the audience because it's a moment where it's kind of the climax of the first act. It's a grotesque, but very, I think, magical little moment.
The Nutcracker is a culmination of many magical moments that have stood the test of time. Today's team of designers seek to honor this original work while enhancing and evolving this timeless story.
A lot of what our job is honoring, as I said, Karinska's original designs. Fabrics change, decoration changes, what's available to us changes. The bottom line is that you want Nutcracker to look the same as when that little girl went decades ago and now has come back with her little girl.
It's so magical every time Nutcracker comes back around. You can really feel that energy. There's so many kids that come to the production, and it has become such a tradition for so many people. You can really feel when the house is packed and everyone's excited to be there and all the little kids are giggling and whispering.
I think a lot of times for all of us here, when we start to get into October, we're thinking, here it comes. At the same time though, I'll sit in the audience and watch a run through of Nutcracker and I'm like, okay, this is it. This is magic, and it was created here decades ago and it still works and it still is exciting and it still makes audiences really excited and it makes kids just like go through the roof.
We always say backstage, like if there was one ballet that we had to do 50 times in a row, it would be Nutcracker.